Go na? Can I start live streaming? Wala pang live stream icon. In the sige, game. Hello po, magandang hapon po at belated happy lunch sa ating mga tagapakinig. We are together today para po pakinggan ang latest research papers of the Move As One Coalition and Alt Mobility, Philippines on Mobility and Transportation sa ating bansa. Bago po tayo magsimula, just a few reminders for everyone. Unang-una po, kindly keep your microphones muted when someone else is speaking. You may ask questions po during the open forum portion of this conference. Maaari niyo rin pong i-type sa chat box ang inyong mga tanong in advance, tapos babalikan na lang po namin mamaya. Kung meron po kayong mga kasama who'd also like to join us and listen to, kindly feel free po na i-forward sa kanila ang event details or send po ng Facebook Live link that Kat Moreno, our Civic Engagement Lead, will type in the chat box. The conference po is being live streamed in both the Move As One Coalition page and the Alt Mobility Facebook page. Our order po of presentation para sa ngayong araw is as follows. Yung una po ay Fighting Transport Inflation, a 10-point agenda by Ken Abante and Dr. Robert C. Jr. from 1:10 to 1:25 p.m. Sunod po ay Bikenomics, Assessing the Value of Cycling in the Philippines by Alt Mobility PH. Namely po, sila Ate Zax Abraham, Ate Sara Arojado, Cola Cobarubias, Patrick Julasco, Chini Liobrera, Ate Kisha Mayuga, Ate Iya Mora, and Kuya Ira Cruz, who will be presenting in behalf of the team today from 1:25 to 1:40 p.m. And then we have our third paper, Towards a People-Centric Mobility Performance Evaluation and Monitoring System in the Philippines by Kat Chang, Daniel Benito, Ken Abante, at ako po. So that's from 1:40 to 1:55 p.m. The rest of the time po will be reserved for the presentation buffer and open forum until 2:30 p.m. At dahil po doon, tayo po yung magsimula na. For the first presentation, transport inflation po is skyrocketing as oil hikes come one after another. Marami po tayong mga manggagawa sa transport sector ang nawalan ng trabaho, hindi lamang noong pandemya, pero even during the aftermath of our coronavirus pandemic. Actually, nangyayari pa siya. Dahil masyado pong magastos bumiyahe. Dahil dyan, nagdurusa po ang ating mga commuters at nasa malalang posibilidad na magkaroon ng COVID transmission sa ating public transport. Si Ken Abante po and Dr. T from the Move As One Coalition will present the coalition's 10-point agenda to fight this deadly transport crisis spiral.
Thank you so much, Haya. I will share my screen. Can you see the screen? Yes? Okay. Thank you. So it's my honor to present our research paper co-written with Sir Robbie, who's here, on Fighting Transport Inflation, 10-point agenda. We are also happy to be back at the PES. We've been doing panels with the Philippine Economic Society over the past few years. And we think this is a very good avenue for us to continue to engage on this very important economic subfield, which is transport economics. I'll go direct to our key findings. The three main ones are: there's been high and persistent transport inflation, double the headline inflation since 2019. This is not something that's transitory, but something that is systemic. It's not something that rate hikes can solve alone. There must be decisive fiscal policy to be able to curb this transport inflation. We'll talk about the basic model for this, which is essentially a supply shock. The pandemic, the oil crisis, and the long government shutdown of public transport have made inflation worse through this supply shock. I'll show with you a basic model that we can all look at to help explain why prices have increased this much. The third key finding is that the only sustainable way to address the sharp rise is to wean ourselves from our dependence on oil and equipment that use oil, such as private cars, specifically for transportation. And we should use decisive fiscal policy to prioritize this shift to walking, cycling, and public transport, which are more environmentally sustainable but also more economically efficient means of travel. And our 10-point agenda is divided into 3 strategies. Of course, since we'll learn about the supply shock model, it's important for us to manage transport inflation by lowering transport demand. That means making people shift to walking and cycling in particular, but also in public transport. The second is to increase our transport supply through net service contracting. And the third is to give decisive social support to our transport sector for a just transition. Allow me to go into the details of our presentation. I think it is not an exaggeration to say that we are in a massive public transport crisis, and this is caused by a massive public transport shortage. We feel this every day as commuters who use our public transport system. A case example, of course, is the Greater Manila area and the Metro Manila area, which is considered to be one of the worst places to be in the world for traffic and congestion. And commuters are suffering through crowded commutes, long lines, and long waiting times that rob us of dignity. These are pictures from Larry Piojo of the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism. Our transport workers, of course, deserve better working conditions. This was a picture of our transport workers needing to beg on the streets because government shut down public transport for too long. And our transport union partners tell us that many transport operators have actually shut down because they were forced to they were also forced to sell their vehicles to survive during the long government shutdown, but also because of the massive oil crisis that has increased their main cost, which is fuel. Allow me to give numbers from the most recent release of the Philippine Statistics Authority of this transport inflation. Transport inflation has been high and persistent. Versus October 2019, the pre-pandemic period, transport inflation has actually increased by 28%. That's nearly double all items, or the headline inflation during that time, which was 14.6%. So this is October 2022 compared to October 2019. And you see a similar trend with October 2021, with 12.5% inflation in transport, one of the highest, one of the contributors to our high inflation numbers, or record high inflation numbers. And most of that, if we go deep into the numbers, are due to 2 major line items, which are the operation of personal transport equipment, which is driving private cars and motorcycles, also driven by the fuel price increase, but also passenger transport services. So this is by specifically by road, by rail, by water, and by air. But if we look even deeper into that number, so we see that road transport inflation is actually the biggest contributor to passenger transport inflation. So passenger transport services prices grew by 29% versus October 2019. But almost 30% of the passenger transport by road grew by nearly 30%, whereas others also had high price increases like air, but fewer people use airlines rather than road, which is more widely used. But we'll focus our interventions on road-based public transportation. In our previous papers, we said that government has invested near zero on commuters and transport workers. In our presentation last year, we argued and we studied actually the government investment in our public transport, road-based public transport system. And we saw that from 2010 to 2021, 99% of our 2.8 trillion peso road budget was spent on car-centric road construction, widening, and maintenance. Even if only 6% of households own and use four-wheel private cars, according to the social weather stations. only 1% of this 2.8 trillion peso budget was spent on expanding public transport supply, walking and cycling. So there's very little wonder why our public transport situation is like this, that there is a massive shortage because we haven't invested in bus rapid transits, in proper stops and terminals, in pedestrian infrastructure and protected bike lanes. So if it is true that that the key to understanding a politician's two priorities is through the budgets that they pass, commuters and transport workers have only been given 1% of attention. And we should flip the script. Another major finding from our previous paper was that our investment paradigm through 2030 is actually also too centered on real transportation. We have no problem with investing in rail, but what is important is we have a better balance for a better normal. We found through our study on mobility demand and supply that even if the entire 2 trillion peso pipeline is built on time, there would still be a public transport shortage through 2030. And this is around 2.8 million daily passenger trips from the case study that we did on the Greater Capital Region from 2021 to 2030. So, and majority of this 2 trillion peso investment, 98% of this is rail. Very little is given to road-based public transport. Again, we have no problem investing in rail, but rail will take maybe 6 to 10 years to complete. But we have very real mobility needs today. And protected bike lanes and bus expansion and the reallocation of road space is a cheaper but more effective alternative that will allow us to get results faster. Again, just a few other numbers on the state of our public transport system even before the pandemic. This has been a trend in Metro Manila's roads. Public transport trips have collapsed since 2016. Relative to 2012 figures, private trips increased by 46%, while public transport trips have plummeted by 14%. So this is a very alarming trend. As people shifted to private car trips, actually average travel times grew longer by 40%. So this type of car-centric public budgeting, 99% for the 6% of households who own cars, and 1% for the majority of Filipinos who walk and cycle, this has resulted in harm even for car users. As more people shifted to private car trips, average travel times grew longer by around 40%. This is not our data, this is official government data from the Metro Manila Development Authority. So why is this the case that transport inflation has increased this much? The basic model, and we see this in our economics 101 classes, the pandemic was really a supply shock. And even the oil crisis was a supply shock because the main input for public transport supply was fuel. So you have massive costs for many transport operators, and you have people supplying less because they don't earn that much money because our current business model is still based on passenger revenues. So when the pandemic happened, of course, the quantity of public transport went down. There's actually a massive shortage, and prices went up. So what do we need to do? The basic model is we need to manage and increase supply and shift demand so that we're able to lower prices. So both have the effect of lowering prices. So I'll just enumerate the 10 key items that we need to do. So first is shifting demand to walking, cycling, and public transport. So the first is it's important to prioritize these modes, both in terms of the budget and in terms of our road space. So we need to allocate more sustainable and more efficient modes of transportation so that people are incentivized to actually walk, cycle, and take public transport. Second, we should rapidly expand the network of protected bike lanes and pathways. Later, we'll talk about our budget proposal. Third, Local government units should apply to the Local Government Support Fund to install bike lanes, pedestrian infrastructure, open spaces, and public parks. There's around 10 billion pesos of this in the 2022 budget, and there's another, if the current provision stands in the 2023 budget, there will also be a provision for local governments to apply to this fund. Fourth is government should allow, encourage, and incentivize companies to have work from home arrangements. And we actually welcome current moves by the economic managers to do this with the BPO companies who have expressed the need, to do more work from home arrangements. And from our recent study, something from a survey, maybe around more than 10% of workers actually can work from home. So whatever it is that we can do to help people to work from home, we should do. The second is to expand public transport supply and capacity. From the time that we wrote this paper, we mentioned that the Department of Transportation and the Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board must allow all public utility vehicle units to operate and authorize more vehicles on routes where operators have consolidated. LTFRB Chair Garafil has since allowed routes in Metro Manila to operate, but we still need to authorize more vehicles on routes where operators are consolidated. There has been, to us, a senseless moratorium on the issuance of franchises in LTFRB, even if there's already a massive shortage. Sixth is we must authorize more vehicles on routes where operators are consolidated and committed to working under common fleet management arrangements. So this allows these public utility vehicles to actually schedule their routes and allow us commuters to have better standards. But essentially, what we need is an expansion of transport supply. The seventh is we should expand the number of public transport units. We have since registered our reservations on the Libreng Sakay model, which is actually cannibalized other routes. It has actually lowered transport supply in routes where there's both Libreng Sakay and non-Libreng Sakay units. We should institute instead a net service contracting initiative where we're able to support and give our transport workers fixed wages, a stable income, while allowing them to also collect fares, which is a better use of our limited fiscal space. We should also urge government to pay delayed wages of workers. Eighth is we should increase the capacity of public utility vehicles to move people by instituting public utility vehicle only lanes or public utility vehicle only hours. Now, there are studies that say these lanes actually can carry more than up to multiples of passengers more than exclusive private car lanes. And finally, the third major plank of the strategy is to give urgent social support for transport workers hit hard by the oil crisis and the pandemic so that there is what we call a just transition. So government must give urgent social support for transport workers hit hard by these twin crises. And that includes giving timely release of the fuel subsidies. And that also includes giving social support through the Public Utility Vehicle Modernization Program, which we're pushing for in the 2023 budget. The Transportation Department must also improve the safety of public transport workers against getting COVID-19 by requiring the ventilation of closed vehicles and monitoring air quality and the adherence to minimum public health standards for those units that are part of this larger reform to the business model of our transport agencies. Allow me to close with our budget proposal and the current state of the 2023 budget. To fix our transport crisis, we need to invest around 1.5% of GDP or 306 billion pesos on these major programs that we mentioned. But the executive has proposed nearly none of these programs for 2023. And as we speak, I think the House has already passed the budget. They have increased it by a bit, by around 3 billion pesos. But this is not nearly enough for proper management of transport inflation. I just studied the Senate committee report that came out just an hour ago. And I found that there was only also a 200 million peso increase for the PUV modernization program. That is also not nearly enough to have our needs, and we should push to make sure that we have our amendments registered next week when the Senate deliberates on the plenary deliberations of the transportation budget. And it's actually very timely that this conference is being held. So allow me to just breeze through the 5 priority budget items that we need in order to manage our transport inflation. So the first is service contracting for all our jeepneys and buses. It's very important to be able to engage all of the jeepney and bus fleet. We should have around 30 kilometers of bike lanes across 130 cities, and have better urban spaces and green spaces and accessible spaces for persons with disabilities. So that will cost around 20 billion pesos. The public utility vehicle only lane stops, terminals, and bus rapid transits should also have a budget that's around 44 billion pesos. And the Davao High Priority Bus System was actually excluded from this year's budget. We think that's an important rapid transit project that should be financed by the national budget. There should be a just transition for transport workers, around 500,000 pesos worth of an equity subsidy to support the purchase of modernized vehicles that will allow more environmentally compliant vehicles to ply their routes. But transport unions are right and are very reasonable in their call to have 20% of the cost of these units to be supported by government, so that it's inclusive to everyone and not just to people who are already financially well off. So our current transport workers should be served by this. And finally, local government support to build mobility offices, to build their local transport offices, to build a transportation institute, and to have a fund that they can use for these critical pandemic response and transport inflation management measures. Again, we thank you for being in our panel discussion this afternoon, and we look forward to working together on passing a budget for safe, humane, and inclusive public transport in the Philippines. Thank you.
Maraming salamat po, Ken and Sir Robbie, who's also with us and will answer some of our questions during the open forum later. These recommendations po were co-designed by our sectoral representatives, transport workers, commuters, cyclists, medical frontliners, persons with disabilities, among others. Talaga pong tulong-tulong na binuno para po magkaroon ng mga rekomendasyon na talagang galing sa sektor na naapektuhan ng ating transportation crisis. Kaya po sana tunay pong makinig ang mga nahalal sa pwesto sa rekomendasyon po ng ating koalisyon. With that, let's proceed to our second presenter for today. Sobrang konti po ng local research tungkol sa mga benepisyo ng pagbibisikleta sa bansa. Kaya malaking bagay po that Alt Mobility Philippines created a local bikeonomics research contextualizing our experiences here in the country, lalo na po sa Metro Manila. Tinatawag po natin sila Kuya Ira Cruz, si Kuya Ira Cruz, Direktor ng Alt Mobility, para ibahagi ang kanilang pag-aaral.
Hello, Aya. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. Let me share my screen. We practiced this last night. I hope it works. Okay, is it working? Is it working?
It's loading.
No. Okay. We practiced this last night.
Kuya Ira. Okay lang, Kat. Papa-share screen ng pre-practice ni Kuya Ira kagabi.
No problem.
Okay. I'll stop sharing. All right. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. Other cat. There we go. Okay, no
Sorry.
problem. I'll be the one to share.
Should I try it again?
No, it's good. Here we go.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so thank you to Ken and of course Robbie for discussing transport inflation, and really promoting active transportation is one of the ways to address it. Through this Bikenomics study, now we'd like to show how biking does not just help address inflation or transport inflation and mobility, but also has benefits across various sectors. Okay, so if you may slide all the way to the slide on background, I'll give a brief background on our study, the one that's just as background. Okay. All right. So further up, sorry, click too much. Okay. Sige, before that, the one before that. Great. Thank you very much. Okay, so before this study was done in the Philippines, the benefits of biking has been limited to anecdotal benefits, mostly from the experience of those that have switched to this mode of transportation or has been using biking as a form of transportation. And that's exactly what we would like to achieve through this exercise, to attach localized numbers to those anecdotal benefits and showed how this also extends to various other sectors. So I am presenting this on behalf of the other contributors to this study, and also in gratitude to FNF Philippines for their support in completing this study. Cycling, as I've mentioned, has been a form of transportation for hundreds, if not thousands of people, even before the pandemic. However, as the total suspension that Ken mentioned earlier of public transportation at the beginning of the pandemic, it left frontline workers scrambling for a way to hospitals and other essential businesses. And I think it's very, very important to surface that as something that the government did to our commuters at the beginning of the pandemic. Next slide, please. But I'd like to say upfront, sorry, next slide, please. But I'd like to say upfront that this is no way exhaustive. The exercise was done for a limited period of 3 months from September 2021 to December of 2021. We only focused on Metro Manila, the largest metropolis in the country, but also the nerve center of mobility crisis in the Philippines. So there are surely gaps in this presentation, also coupled with an environment of irregular and fragmented data collection, if it's even being collected at all. But what we also want to achieve is to simply create a baseline as a start or as a jump-off point for hopefully many other studies in this field. Incidentally, also call to attention the lack of this discipline of data collection and data sharing and transparency in government. So we hope that through the humble beginnings of Bikenomics, we are able to inspire leaders, decision makers, to defend the gains in bike infrastructure achieved in the last 2 years, however lacking, and to continue promoting active transportation. Next slide, please. The study will focus on 4 sectors: infrastructure and business, health, energy and environment, and community impact. Next slide, please. So hands down, in a metropolis like Metro Manila, bikes move people more efficiently than private vehicles. And favoring bike infrastructure over new roads offer a lot of savings on government expenditure to the tune of 26.7 million pesos per kilometers. So for every 9.7 kilometers of bike lanes, you can, for every 1 kilometer of car lane, you can build 9.7 kilometers of bike lanes. To individuals that are biking instead of driving, This brings an average savings of at least 281,000 pesos a year from fuel, parking, and car maintenance. And the focus on cycling also brings business opportunities for bike-friendly businesses. A new customer base can account for as much as 25% of sales, and also a potential additional revenue of 648,000 per parking slot reallocated to customer dining or bicycle parking. Next slide, please. Sliding over now to the health sector. An increase in number of cyclists on road can lower economic costs of road crashes by decreasing the risk of getting hit by motor vehicles. Essentially, safety in numbers. The study also sees a very conservative yearly savings of 738 million pesos in health expenses on non-communicable diseases such as chronic heart disease, type 2 diabetes, breast and colon cancer, and stroke that has been linked to lack of physical activity. Now, the World Health Organization recommends about 200 minutes per week of regular exercise to maintain a healthy lifestyle, and an average bike commute of about 11 kilometers per day can help achieve this. Additionally, it can also help lower hearing impairments due to noise currently affecting 15% of Filipinos. So next slide, please. Moving on to energy and environment. The prevailing car dependence contributes to road congestion. We all know that. And it costs our economy an estimated 20 billion pesos annually. And as one of the biggest, if not the biggest, contributor to greenhouse gases, a reduction in car dependence can translate to a reduction of CO2 emissions equivalent to planting 2.31 million trees a year. So cycling is about 10 times lower in terms of carbon emission. And this reduction in car dependence can create also more livable cities and more livable space by decreasing air and noise pollution. Next slide, please. Now, while this is an exercise into quantifying the benefits of cycling, we have to add that cycling has changed Metro Manila culture in ways that cannot necessarily be directly quantified. The cycling community has grown significantly, tremendously even, since the beginning of the pandemic, and has slowly become popular across all age groups and genders. Now, gender is very important, and we'll go back to that later on. This wave of enthusiasm for cycling has been an opportunity to continue promoting cycling as a viable mode of transportation, not just during the pandemic, but most definitely beyond the pandemic. As I mentioned gender earlier, a savings of at least 15 minutes in travel time has the potential to benefit women through independence of movement and allowing them to complete tasks that have been traditionally attributed to women. And it's also been a very crucial lifeline for many of our frontliners, a lot of our city dwellers. So I'm going to slide all the way down, fast forward to the recommendations. As I've said in the beginning, we hope that this is just the start of the focus of data-driven governance and the deployment of correct metrics in decision-making. Through this study, we hope that there will be a renewed appreciation for data collection and data sharing and transparency. Finally, we just want to leave this note that transportation is a public service. It is very fundamental to the life of all cities. And hopefully, this study will inspire leaders, or at least inform leaders and decision makers to defend the gains and to continue promoting active transportation, but also implement fundamental reforms, ones that also Ken has also mentioned, to improve mobility for all and be a tool for true economic progress. Thank you.
Ayan, salamat po Kuya Ira. Kitang-kita naman po kung gaano ka-beneficial ang pag-shift to active transportation sa bansa. Hindi lang sa personal na benepisyo, kundi dahil makakabawas tayo sa pangkalahatang trapiko. So salamat po kay Kuya Ira at sa Alt Mobility. And si Cola, who is also part of the authors who are nandito po ngayong araw for doing this study. Before we proceed with the last presentation, mga Mi, remember po to accomplish the attendance form that Brian from our PES Secretariat sent in the group chat. So, pa-accomplish na lang po yun. And then, now let's move on po to our last presentation. Isa po sa mga pinakamalaking dahilan kung bakit malala ang public transport crisis sa bansa ay dahil nakasentro po sa kotse ang ating measures of success. Gaano nga ba kalawak ang kalsada, gaano nga ba kabilis ang mga sasakyan, at gaano ba karami ang road construction projects na ongoing na ginagawa. Sa halip na itanong kung gaano nga ba karaming tao ang nasaserbisyuhan ng ating mga daan at kung gaano kabilis ang kanilang pag-travel from one point to another. Si Ken, si Kat at si Daniel po will present the coalition's recommendations towards a people-centric mobility and performance evaluation in the Philippines.
Okay, salamat po dun sa introduction na yun, Haya. Let me just share my screen before we jump straight into it. Okay, so as I mentioned, so we'll be presenting on mobility metrics. The longer version of the title is Towards a People-Centric Mobility Performance Evaluation and Monitoring System in the Philippines. So this is really, a review of existing metrics and the governance systems for transportation and mobility in the country, and our recommendations to accelerate and properly evaluate the shift from vehicle-centered to people-centered approaches in this sector. So first, what really were we looking at when we started this study? One reason, as mentioned by Ken earlier, for the systemic public transport shortage in the Philippines is really that our success metrics are focused on cars and not people. I'll go a little bit more into that later, but just to give an idea, the research questions that we were looking to answer when we were doing the study are really, one, what are the Philippines' current transport success metrics? Second, what priority people and nature-centered mobility and success metrics should the public agencies collect? And how should they be prioritized by effort and impact? And finally, how might we organize our transport institutions to collect, analyze, and use these transport and mobility success metrics to fulfill the vision of the national transport policy? So most of our study was really done more as a review of available data online. So our focus was more on key national and local agencies and metrics and goal statements. And this is, based on our assessment of the administrative feasibility and political supportability of the success metrics. We'll be providing recommendations later on, as mentioned, on how we should change the system of measurement. But we are unable to provide actual numerical targets of what these should be. And these are really what should be done as an ongoing analysis, given the implementing agencies of how they're seeing kind of what the performance is like and how that should improve continuously as time goes on. So our objective is for our goal statements to serve as a guide for local and national policymakers to set key performance targets for our mobility and transportation in the Philippines. So where are we right now? Like we're saying we need to rethink the performance evaluation metrics for our transportation system, and that's because currently what we're seeing, especially for road and road passenger transport related success metrics, is that they're very focused on private vehicles, on enforcement, on basically how projects are being implemented by various government agencies. What do I mean? What we're seeing in the metrics is, for example, what is the length in kilometers of the roads and bridges being constructed? Or what is the percent of licenses that have been issued to motor vehicles? Or what is the average travel speed along Metro Manila roads, which again is going to be based on private vehicles. So the common theme we're seeing here is that these do tell you how well kind of certain measures might be implemented. So if there's a specific objective to, build 600 kilometers of bridges, have they successfully done that or not? But it doesn't tell us anything about how it's translating to the experience of the commuter, the experience of the people who are actually meant to benefit from those roads, from those bridges, from all those things, right? And that's not what it should be. And the scope, the scope of these regular data collection for the transportation system is limited, and many key information that we use now are actually just being collected on an ad hoc basis, whether by the government or even, NGOs, international development agencies, and the like, such as transport modal share or the demand for mobility in the first place, or the impact on vehicular emissions or bicycle counts and similar things. So the irony is that, or well, not really the irony, but the policy, the vision has already been kind of set. So we have a national transport policy from NEDA, the National Economic and Development Authority in the Philippines, which itself expresses a vision for a national transport system that ensures improved quality of life of the people. So just quickly, what it says about the vision is that it's a safe, secure, reliable, efficient, integrated, intermodal, affordable, cost-effective, and environmentally sustainable and people-oriented national transport system that ensures improved quality of life of the people. So this, very fairly captures what mobility and transportation should be doing, or how it should be developed with respect to really serving the people, the citizens of a country, right? And the question is, how do we get there? How do we ensure that the metrics that we have on hand right now actually are able to achieve this vision? And what we recommend is starting with a priority set of people-centered metrics to inform better policy making and transport planning. Just very broadly, we grouped it into three main categories. First is transport experience quality. Second is transport infrastructure quality. And third is socioeconomic and environmental sustainability metrics. And the very important thing is that each of these metrics must have one or multiple goal statements to make improvements quantifiable and data-based, such as shown on the screen, X% of the population just waits for Y minutes or less to get a ride. We don't want people waiting forever, right, just to get on a bus or get on a tricycle for a 2-kilometer destination, for example. And then, other things like, it's not just about the speed, right? But it's also about how this works within the general economic picture of an average Filipino household. So no more than X pesos per day should be spent on transport to and from work. And, other things that are really showing kind of how the dedication, perhaps, or how the system is being geared towards ensuring that the infrastructure or projects or whatnot being implemented is actually geared towards making sure that people are able to move from point A to point B. So these are just a few more examples of kind of just slightly more detailed groupings of what the metrics should focus on. And we'll be sharing kind of links of our presentation and our papers later on. So you can look into more detail on that. For now, Daniel will be talking through some more items on the implementation of our recommendations.
Thank you, Kat. So to ensure that the list of metrics presented in the previous slide won't remain as a wish list, we recommend the creation of a transportation institute leading the gathering, processing, and analysis of people-centered metrics. Currently, the transportation data collection and analysis functions are scattered across the bureaucracy, but from the transportation experts that we have interviewed, they all agree on the need for a separate unit leading this objective, similar to the Korean Transport Institute or the US Bureau of Transportation Statistics. More specifically, the creation of a dedicated unit could help us in addressing the following issues and challenges. So first, there's a need for a clear repository of transportation data. The Institute could facilitate easier mapping and consolidation of the scattered transportation data from different sources. It can also help us harmonize data collection processes. For instance, in our interviews, it was highlighted that there are data quality issues for road safety data. So the number of road crashes are often understated on the LGU on some records because some incidents ends up not being reported. And as described by our LGU respondents, usually the number of road crashes data in LGU records does not match the records in the police offices. So this highlights the need to standardize processes and even establish data sharing protocols between, for example, PNP, LGU, and even health institutions. So the second is on the lack of active transport data, such as the number of pedestrians and cyclists on a given location and time. So mahalaga yung halimbawa yung research na ginagawa ng Alt Mobility para matulungan punan yung pangangailangan nito. In our interview with the OTR, they shared that they currently have actually a staff working on active transport advocacy. They have also procured cameras and sensors to help in counting cyclists and pedestrians. However, they express challenges still in collection of data because they are doing it on top of their policy work and other projects, which leads us to the third point on third challenge on overloading and lack of technical capacity. So if metrics collection and analysis are added to current workload of existing groups already, there is definitely a risk that it will not be implemented properly given other priorities and mandates of that current group. And moreover, usually this line of work requires a different skill set. And for the fourth one, a significant number of important transportation data that we currently know of were actually collected through projects that were funded by grants or international partners. But the concern there is at certain point, we need to update this to better inform our projections and transportation planning. So establishing an institute can serve as a milestone toward being less dependent to external partners in terms of data collection and push us to really collect the data more regularly. Next slide, please. So how this institute may look like, we propose this to be an attached agency. The institute can be headed by an executive director with the rank of an undersecretary. So as an attached agency, it will regularly report to an executive department, but it also has some degree of independence, particularly in terms of appointments. Its independence can pave the way for a more objective insights and recommendations and better lobby for and plan for continuity of policies, which is often challenged by changing leadership in every administration. The institute can have 4 main functions. You may have a team that will work on establishing information systems needed for automated, timely, and efficient collection. Second, you can have a team managing data standards and processes to ensure quality data. Third, you can also have a team conducting analysis and further research based on the data collected to ensure that we really harness the benefits from data. And finally, you can also have a team to do capacity building to build the next generation of transportation planners. Next slide, please. So, but prior to establishing this dedicated transportation institute, the following should be considered. First, we need to identify its mother agency or where the institute will be an attached agency of. The Department of Transportation is the most intuitive answer to this. But however, there are some issues because of possible overlaps on scope and functions on data collection, like with other agencies like the DPWH, who also have jurisdictions over managing road and bridge networks. Although we believe that this can be addressed by having clear agreements between the agencies. Second is on human resource requirements. So definitely the new institute would require additional budget line items for regular personnel. We estimate an annual budget of around 50 million to 82 million for the personal salaries and benefits, considering the initial structure presented a while ago with some administrative support. Third, there's a need to clarify the delineation scope of work between national and local transport authorities. While the institute can be housed in one of the national agencies, it can also ask local authorities to submit data, as some indicators can be more efficiently gathered by the LGUs. What data should be collected by the national agency and what data should be collected by the local transport authorities should be clearly identified. The case of South Korea provides a good example for this. So the South Korea's national government usually sets the general policies and guidelines, but the subnational units are responsible for the planning, execution, monitoring, and evaluation of their own transportation system, but making sure that it's still aligned with the national government's direction. Then the local government are also focused on the daily life travels of their constituents, but the national government is in charge of the more long-distance travel. So these are some of the dynamics that we can also learn from the South Korea's experience. And for the fourth one, we need to be conscious of to have buy-in from the agencies working or involved in transportation systems. A recurrent theme across our interviews is the need for a paradigm shift that has to happen with these agencies. From vehicle-centric measures, greater importance should be put on people-centric measures. And a concrete step to help facilitate this is to change also some of the key performance indicators used as a basis in budgets. Next slide, please. So to summarize, here are some recommendations or action points that we can do. So within 3 months, the DOTR can assign staff members to work with TWG on transport statistics. Meanwhile, survey firms like SWS could incorporate public and active transport confidence on satisfaction question in regular surveys. But this is very, posible po ito kasi ginagawa na nga siya ng SWS sa ilang recent surveys po nila. Sunod po. In the next 6 months, the executive branch can sign and own an executive order creating the DOTR Transport Institute. On the local side, LGUs can also build their own active transport offices and public transport offices to help in the data collection. But it would be helpful also if there are technical and financing facilities are set up to support LGUs. For the MMDA, we recommend for them to automate pedestrian cycling counts and increase the frequency of data collection and publishing of results. Then one of the things that was shared also by our LGU respondents, yung nakamotivate din talaga sa kanila mag-collect ng data ay some mobility awards. So in the same way, the DILG could also incorporate governance and commuter-centered indicators in the seal of good local governance and the local competitiveness index. Next slide, please. For the more longer term, some of the more longer term recommendations, once the institute has been established, it can facilitate the design of the public transport research agenda, consulting, of course, with consensus from different stakeholders. Second, the government can also pass a law or a joint memorandum circular clarifying the split of transport functions between local and national government functions. So these are some of the structural reforms we need to push for a better data collection of people-centered metrics, which in turn can actually guide us and lead us to insights to better manage various transportation problems, such as, for example, the high transportation inflation. So thank you for listening, and we look forward to your comments and questions in the Q&A. Thank you.
Yan, maraming salamat Daniel and Kat sa inyong presentation. Ngayon naman po, may kita natin doon sa kanilang presentasyon na sobrang talagang car-centric ng ating transportation system, ang ating mga pulisiya, at ito po ay na-echo ni Sir Carlos. Ayan, Sir Carlos Kionivelio. Ayan, may special mention ka, sir. Kasi tama po yung insights ni sir na very car-centric talaga yung kahit yung infrastructure planning. If you look at it, kahit po sa mga budget ng ating government agencies, the priority is really road widening and road construction. And even po sa mga usual conversations on the ground, parang recently there has been a bill passed para magkaroon ng free parking sa malls, for example, and different establishments, etc. And this parking usually just constitute of car parking, not so much on bicycles, and even not so much on walkable pedestrian lanes, for example, na accessible kahit sa ating mga kapatid na may kapansanan. And now let's move on to our open forum, which we'll have until 30 minutes later. Actually, my first question ang nag-PM sa akin. Ayan, question po from the panelists from Sir Juan Rafael. Sorry, hindi ko po ma-pronounce yung name niya. Would you like to ask for your question or do you want me to read it?
Okay. I'm willing to ask po.
Go po. Go, sir.
Okay. Thank you. For the panelists, I would just like to ask, what are the underlying reasons as to why the government has yet to pump investment into sustainable transportation? Is it the lack of fiscal space, wrong budgetary allocation, or etc.? Thank you.
Do you want me to begin?
Yeah, go Ken. Go Ken. First draft.
Yeah, thank you. How do I pronounce your name?
Yuan po.
Yuan. Thank you for your question, Yuan. So to be fair, since 2020, we've actually worked with government to start trying to shift investments to road-based public transport. No, and the past 2 years, through critical collaboration with government, we were able to push for around 26 billion pesos of investments in service contracts in protected bike lanes, so which allowed for the construction of the Manila, Cebu, and Davao bike lanes, and the payment of transport workers under the service contracting program, although we disagree on the implementation specifically with Libreng Sakay. But it has helped. No, it has helped some of our transport workers with who were part of that program, but not so much in a systemic way yet. But this year again, I think the difficulty is every time we engage in the budget process, these budget provisions are zeroed out. So last year we experienced this, Yuan. This year we experienced this again. So in the slide that I showed you a while ago, parang zeroed out yung proposals for active transport, for service contracts. Pero ngayon binalik ng House 1 billion for active transport, 2 billion pesos for service contracts, which is like very far from what we need. And in fact, the Public Utility Vehicle Modernization Program in the House, it was zero. It stokes fears with our transport workers unions who really fear that there will be a de facto phase out of traditional jeepneys. If there is no budget like that, it's like we're saying to our transport workers, you will be out of work. And I think it's important that government sees the urgency of this. I think now the reason that we're hearing is the lack of fiscal space. No, but it's very easy to debunk that by saying that there's 5 trillion pesos in this budget. The second is they've carved out a lot of budget for rail, so we can't do a road anymore. But it's also very easy to debunk that by saying we actually have more modal share for road-based public transport. There's also parang one of the areas in which maybe it's a coordination thing between the Department of Budget and Management and the Department of Transportation. But I think those conversations can still be had in the legislative process, and it doesn't mean that our commuters and transport workers and cyclists should suffer the consequences of not being able to invest. But again, I think the transport sector is one of the clearest illustrations that inflation was not transitory. That you need not just monetary policy, the increase of rates, but you need a very decisive fiscal policy, to be able to transform the sector. So that coordination between the central bank and the monetary board. I see members of the central bank here. Thank you for your service, ma'ams and sirs. In managing that very sticky, inflation that we have with our transport that is caused by that underlying shortage.
Thank you so much, Ken. Nasagot pa yung tanong mo, Yuan?
I just wanted to add one last thing.
Go.
We're saying, diba, 1.5% of GDP yung kailangan. This can be done within the current economic framework of the economic managers for the 5% of GDP infrastructure budget target. No? So even within that framework, kasya pa rin yung 1.5% of GDP. No? So we think there's no reason that this cannot be done. And we think that these are the priorities that government should pursue. And as they mentioned, but the economic and labor multipliers of cycling and even land transport are actually higher than construction and normal build. So we think we should engage in these economically effective interventions so that our economic recovery can continue.
Thank you, Ken. Kuya Ira?
I'd like to add to what Ken said. No? I think one of the challenges why government, and this is government in general, no? Not just national, but also local governments, do not place as much value. And for me, the way that you express what government prioritizes is by means of a budget. The budget is a declaration of government priority. And you can see that they're not allocating enough priority to it. But I think it has a lot to do, first and foremost, cultural, that there's been a misplaced value on private vehicles being a symbol of success or even importance or priority on the road, or even what or even the definition of what progress or what success is. If you look at the old NEDA study on Vision 20 something, I forgot which version it was. It really shows that part of a Filipino's dream is to own a motor vehicle because of this cultural and misplaced value on motor vehicles. And even when we talk about when we derogatorily say nag-commute lang ako, there's a lang, which means that you are taking a more inferior form of transportation. I think that's a very big hurdle to jump, which attaches to the second thing, which is a massive paradigm shift into, as they've discussed, metrics. What are we measuring? When the MMDA releases information on the performance of EDSA, quantified by speed of vehicles versus number of vehicles being moved, this is a representation of their focus, which is a misplaced one. Even when we talk about what problem we're solving, what they're saying is, how do you solve traffic? It's very, very telling because traffic or road congestion, as we refer to it, it's really just a manifestation of a bigger problem. And so the question should have been, how do you now improve mobility? So when you're talking about traffic, you're only talking about those people in metal boxes. But it should have been a greater discussion of how do you improve mobility for all? Do you create an environment that moves everybody, regardless of mode of transportation? So highly cultural and really a massive paradigm shift for government.
Thanks, Kuya Ira. Sir Rob, before calling you, I think let's ask si Jose sa kanyang question because maganda po yung kanyang input dun sa discussion. Jose, are you able to open your mic?
Hello, yes. Yung question ko lang regarding people within the executive, meron bang mga nagpo-push for active mobility and road-based public transport from our concerned agencies gaya ng DOTR and DPWH?
Thanks, Jose. Sir Rob?
Yeah, definitely, Jose. There are champions all over government who recognize that sustainable mobility, yung walking, cycling, public transport is the way to go. And what I want to add also is, as economists, we are very interested in both efficiency and equity. And when we look at the, what Ira mentioned also as the paradigm shift, we need to understand that, the priority today being given to private motor vehicles in the use of road space, we are choosing the least efficient travel option. We need to look at the most efficient and also the most inclusive travel options. And that means walking, cycling, and public transport. We are all pedestrians and a very large, like Ken mentioned earlier, 29% of households already are using bicycles, and definitely so many millions of Filipinos rely on public transport. So these are the directions we would like the executive as well as our budget managers to point the use of our resources. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Sir Robbie. At salamat po ulit kay Sir Mike and SWST. Nandito po actually Sir Mike today. Na sa kanila po galing yung datos na sobrang dami na po talaga ang nag-shift to more sustainable options, more sustainable modes of transportation like biking as much as 5 times in different areas in the Philippines. Tawagin ko po si wait lang po, natabunan na. Sir Albert to ask his question.
Hello po, good afternoon to the panelists. My question is, well, kanina pa nating pinag-uusapan yung government public policy, but we also need to take into consideration the influence of the private sector in terms of our transportation system. So how do we factor in private roadways, our skyways, our expressways in pushing for a more people-centric transport? And how do we encourage private companies who own these private roadways to also invest in people-centric infrastructure for transportation? Thank you.
Thanks, Sir Albert. Bago po yung sa question na yon, idagdag ko po yung isang anonymous question dito kasi related siya. Gaano daw po ka-align yung tawag natin for more sustainable transport sa National Transport Policy? So medyo magkakapatid po yung questions na yun, pati yung tinanong ni Sir Albert. Sino po gustong gumawa ng first draft? Ayan, si Rob.
I can offer a response. This question sometimes is related to, how much more road and bridge infrastructure should we invest in? And for us in the coalition, road and bridge infrastructure is still very important in terms of improving the mobility of people both in rural and urban areas. The question is more how the roads and bridges should be used. And here, we should find designs and approaches that will prioritize yung movement of people and goods over the movement of vehicles, and recognize that we need to look at all the different users of roads, especially those who are also disadvantaged and most vulnerable. So definitely, the design and function of our roads and bridges need to be modified so that we address yung uses, the different types of users that we find today. Going into yung question, Albert, about expressways and tollways, definitely they are still very important in terms of connecting different provinces, different cities. Where we need to be more cautious is how they impact the use of space within cities and urban areas. And this is where we can see that sometimes or oftentimes an expressway or a tollway that cuts through the interior of a city or a very dense urban area can have more harm than good. So this is where we would ask our government planners and legislators to also look with more circumspection on these types of infrastructure within cities.
Thanks, Sir Rob. Si Katchang na po maidadagdag, pero bago yun, Katchang, may tatapon akong additional question sa inyo ni Daniel. So, from your research, in the absence of a unified, organized data collection, ano yung naging basihan ng gobyerno sa paggawa ng mga desisyon at polisiya? Kat Chiang and
Okay, I will add first to the previous question before addressing highest surprise follow-up question. So actually, quickly adding to what Sir Rob said on kind of the interaction between basically private spending on transportation infrastructure vis-a-vis government spending. The irony is that out of everyone, private companies are the most consumer-driven. Just by the very nature of being a for-profit industry, they're there to serve the needs of the customer. So what they do is mostly kind of in response to what they're seeing that the market needs or what the market wants. And right now, the way all the policies are set up and kind of just the way the system is planned is that a person needs a car to get around, to put it simply. It's very difficult to do anything otherwise, but given the proper incentives and all of that, there's actually going to be, I firmly believe there's going to be a big drive towards kind of, investing in all those other things. Like, for example, when LRT, MRT projects are being planned and the government bids those out, there's significant interest from private industry. So they're not just solely pushing for private roads to be created, toll roads to be prioritized as a mode of transportation, but rather what is the need of the people. So that's something that really needs to be considered. And like Haya said, or Haya asked, if your national transport policy says that your vision is for everything to be interconnected, there's a safe, reliable transportation system, and that's really being seen in the policies, then everything else follows. So honestly, Haya, I kind of forgot the first part of your question. So I just heard national transport policy. So I don't think I answered it correctly. So if you mind repeating it before we respond, that would be great.
So second part na lang, Kat, parang in the absence of, alam mo yun, parang unified organized data collection, ano yung basihan ng gobyerno sa paggawa ng mga
Okay, I guess I'll take a first stab at it. Then Daniel, you can add. No, so that's an interesting question, right? Right now, I mean, especially kind of this is where society has been progressing. We want to be data driven. We want the numbers to, we want our decisions to be backed by actual evidence. And there are many ways to get evidence. I guess let's put it that way. Sometimes, what you see, you think that's what it is. But when you do a deeper study, the numbers might tell you otherwise. So we don't know. But given that we've seen that there's a lack of kind of organized, frequent, regular data studies, perhaps what data available on hand is being used as a basis. And while that may paint a part of the picture, it might necessarily paint the full picture. So, and that's why it's really very important to improve our metrics, to improve just generally how data is being collected, so that we can make holistic decisions and be able to respond to what is happening in real time.
Thanks, Kat.
Maybe, hello. Just to add on Kat's point, siguro reiterate na lang yung point din kanina na I think so far it's more of government is also more dependent on international grants or partners to collect this data. But then yun na yung nagiging basis. And the concern there is nga, hindi siya ganun ka-frequent. So parang ad hoc siya kung kailan lang siya kailangan. Whereas kung regularly collected yung data, diba, or may mas systemized, harmonized data systems tayo, mas magiging proactive at hindi tayo magiging reactive lang in responding.
Can I add one last point? So when we do our policy papers, we try our best to get all available public data on transport. And that's what we try to do. So actually, to be fair, meron namang ibang mga datasets, but they're not as granular as we need them to be in terms of understanding where in particular we need to have interventions, although that shouldn't prevent us from doing urgent interventions that are needed during this pandemic. Di ba kasi minsan, let's study it is the bureaucratic term for it will never happen. We'll shelve it. So I was also from government, so I kind of bureaucraties. So there's very clear evidence, no, even from a macro level, about what needs to happen, there are enough case studies and qualitative case studies, and that tell you that these types of interventions, shifting modal shift, shifting road space, budgeting for protected bike lanes, walkways, improving public transport frequencies and supply. All of these are important macro objectives that we hope that we can help shift the mindset of moving people and focusing on nature and animals and plants and trees who have equal rights to our cities as we do as humans.
Thanks, Ken. Dagdag ko lang quickly kasi ako po ay isang animal lover. Please, bawasan na po natin ang roadkill sa kalsada. Parang utang na loob po. Sobrang dami ng hindi lang po mga tao ang nasagasaan, pati po yung mga hayop natin na gusto lang naman tumawid. Dahil sobrang bilis ng magpatakbo ng sasakyan ng mga tao at dahil po maliit sila, usually hindi sila nahasalba, usually hindi sila nadala sa ospital, they're just left in the road for other cars to pass by. So ano po tayo, parang the entire shift to more nature, animal-centric and people-centric mobility is also for the lives of these individuals, for the lives of these entities who can't defend themselves and who can't speak up and who can't afford healthcare access, for example. And while we're at this question, gusto ko lang din po idagdag na itanong. Ngayon po parang for the metrics team to, so Katchang, Daniel, and Ken, ngayon, ano yung pinakamahalagang metric na sinusukat ng gobyerno sa tingin nyo from your research? At yung follow-up question dun ay, what do you think should be the most impactful success metrics that we should start measuring instead?
Hello. So I will answer first what the most important metric that should be recorded moving forward. I think it was something that I think I mentioned earlier. One super important metric I think that captures a lot of things is kind of the X% of the population waits for Y minutes or less to get a ride. This tells you, one, do you have enough supply? Because if you have a consistent flow of public transport available, then you can kind of really manage na, within 5 minutes or less, makakasakay na yung pasahero. Then second, it also tells you kind of how the transport options are geographically spread out. Na yes, it might be very concentrated in Metro Manila, for example, but what about the other provinces, or what about the outskirts of the city center? If even for them, you're able to kind of give consistent access and reliable access to transport, then you're showing that your public transportation system is also very equitable and very accessible to all. And I guess finally, one other thing that this encompasses is you're able to show that people have a means to get from where they need to go, right? This is anywhere from going to work, going to pick up essentials, basically, moving people from point A to point B. So it captures a lot of things. Daniel, I don't know if you have any insight. Maybe you can add to that before we answer the other question.
Actually, for me, same din. I think it's the commuter journey time, yung isang mahalagang metric talaga na kailangan mabantayan dahil nga may indication din siya ng ibang supply and demand of the transport system. But I think for me, isa ding interesting na maganda rin siguro mag-collecta talaga yung parang some sort of a commuter survey, quality and satisfaction survey. Kasi madalas naririnig lang natin sa social media yung rants ng mga tao eh. But I think it would be good also, similar to, for example, BSP's confidence survey, parang you'll have an outlook kung kamusta ba yung, kasi it's also a reflection of kamusta yung mga programa at polisiya natin para sa mga commuter. So I think having a more objective sense of evaluating that from the perspective of the commuter is really people-centric, diba? Kasi sa kanila mismo manggagaling na yung kamusta ba sila. Ayun.
And siguro, in the process of answering kind of the question of what are the best metrics that are currently being collected, I guess dito ma-highlight na there really is a need to shift to a more people-centric view because what we have right now are really more macroeconomic or more overall data indicators. I would say, I think, two very important metrics or data points that we have available to us now are first kind of the inflation data, as has been discussed extensively by Ken earlier, because it really demonstrates, how the rider, the commuter, is personally affected by kind of these inflationary pressures all around. So how much more they have to spend on transport, and especially, when you compare to how wages have increased or basically what your disposable household income is, you'll see the impact. And then second, I think, while this might not necessarily be, I guess, the best way to go about it yet, the annual average daily traffic data from MMDA does give us insight on what the composition of vehicles are in Metro Manila roads. And what it tells us is, there are mostly public vehicles that are currently mostly private vehicles that are currently occupying the roads, and that we have seen downtrends in the number of jeepneys and buses that have been plying Metro Manila roads. So unfortunately, this does paint the picture of a declining public transport supply, even as the number of people who have to take public transport continue to increase. So for me, these are just the metrics that we have available right now that are able to tell us what else we need to do.
Thanks, Kat and Daniel. For our last question po, ito importante and kahit po ako gusto ko siyang maintindihan lalo. We have our friends here from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas joining us today, and I think some of our other econ majors. Pero for the rest of us, mga common ordinary individuals, pwede niyo po ba kaming i-walk through kung ano po ang epekto ng transport inflation on the ground? Kasi po, di ba, parang sobrang abstract niya. Pero recently, we've seen all the red flags. Si Ken kanina halimbawa, may talk pa lang sa ANC explaining na sobrang taas nga ng transport inflation, driving the overall inflation in the country. Pero po sa pang-araw-araw, how does it affect us?
You want me to start, Taya? Wala kang tinawag.
Sige na, huwag ka na mahiya.
Mataas ang pamasahe. Yun basically. At sunog yung bulsa mo. At ayaw natin ng ganun kasi I think real wages have also been declining diba, all over the country. And we know for a fact that inflation for the general public is not the same inflation as what the bottom 30% of the population in terms of income feel. So they feel a higher inflation, in fact. And that's what we see as well for our prices. So mas masakit yung impact ng tumataas na presyo ng pamasahe at yung tumataas na presyo ng langis. So that's passenger inflation. We've covered that. What we did not cover but is also in the data, even the transport of goods is affected by higher inflation. So hindi lang yung parang mataas na presyo ng pamasahe pag kailangan kong pumunta sa palengke. Pag pumunta ako ng palengke, mas mataas din yung presyo ng gulay. Mataas din yung presyo ng kailangan kong bilhin kasi the way that we transport our goods is also affected by the oil crisis and the way that we transport our goods. So parang may feedback loops yan within the price the price mechanisms, no, that that really affect our daily lives. So it's important. That's why the job of the Bangko Sentral and the economic managers is so important to our daily lives. That's why rate hikes are, closely watched. But as we mentioned, diba, it's more than just rate hikes. Diba? The rate hikes won't solve this very real transport shortage. What's important is a decisive fiscal policy for specifically for budgeting that will help us transform the way that we wean ourselves from oil and private vehicle dependence.
Siguro just to add quickly, another angle to consider is more than just magiging mas mahal yung pamasahe mo, it's also possible na wala kang masakyan. Basically, if your transport workers, your drivers are not able to pass on the costs that they have to absorb on the higher oil prices, ang kawawa yung commuters din. Dahil ang mangyayari is wala na yung mga sasakyan nila. They're not gonna apply the routes. So now you have more people trying to squeeze in a limited number of vehicles, or otherwise, they'd be either forced to walk very long distances or yun, mahirap talaga.
Thanks,
Yes,
thanks Kat, and thanks for everyone in our panel, for Rob, Ken, and Daniel. And quickly lang po, dagdag ko lang, kasi po malapit sa puso ko yung sinabi ni Kat. Ako po galing po ako sa transport community, si Papa po jeepney driver, and so far po dun sa komunidad, kapag talaga sobrang taas ng presyo ng krudo, at hindi kami pwedeng magtaas ng pamasahe hanggat walang regulation, for example, at matagal po yun maaprubahan. Right now po kahit yung 12 pesos na pamasahe ay hindi po sapat para ma-cover yung linggo-linggong pagtaas ng 6 na piso, 3 piso, 4 na piso ng krudo. Hindi po talaga siya sapat. At hindi lang po yung krudo yung tumataas, pati po yung maintenance. So minsan kailangan din itaas yung boundary. So yung sa pinakahuli po, yung pinaka-take home pay talaga ng ating mga jeepney driver, for example, sobrang kulang siya. Sobrang kulang as usual. Tapos mababawasan pa siya. Kasi sabi nga po ni Ken kanina, nagmamahal din yung presyo ng pagkain sa palengke. Nung bumisita po ako, yung pinakamura na is 33 pesos. At yung kanin, yung bigas pong yun, may halo ng NFA. Ganun na siya kamahal sa merkado. And nasa probinsya po ako. So what more pa sa Metro Manila yung presyohan ng ating mga goods and services. So yun lamang po. Malaki po ang epekto ng ating transport inflation sa pang-araw-araw na ginagawa. At sa pang-araw-araw na naranasan natin sa ekonomiya, lalo na po para sa mga ordinaryong manggagawa na nasa minimum wage pa rin po ang sahuran. At para sa ating araw-araw po, ating mga siklista, ating iba't ibang vulnerable road users, for example, na nakikipagsapalaran para sa mga kalsada, importante po na ma-shift talaga completely yung ating success metrics. Kasi hanggat ang prioridad po natin ay yung mahabang road construction, yung ating mga road widening projects, for example, at yung number of cars na dumadaan ng expressway, lagi pong nanganganib ang buhay ng mga siklista natin, ng mga ating kapatid na may kapansanan, ng ating mga nakatatandang tumatawid ng kalsada, at syempre po ng ating bata at mga buntis na kababaihan. So yun lamang po. Ako po ipapasa ang ating corona kay Ken para sa ating ceremonial picture taking as our official photographer.
Correct. Ako po ang official photographer.
Maraming salamat po for everyone. Correct. For attending this webinar, sinend po ulit ni Ken yung summary links po na aming research. So for our friends who are here, especially po for those who are interested also, pwede nyo pong i-download mga papel na ito. Go, official photographer.
Ayan, thank you po. So we would like to invite everyone, if they're able to please open their cameras. Maybe we can stop the live stream. So people are free to so maybe around